Video is like the web video of you is
Yeah.
optional for you.
Are
No one
we
has
are we
chosen
doing
that
that, or
option
is
yet
it
today, but we have no. I encourage its use. When I present later, I will try my webcam because I like to stare at people.
okay?
It's up to you.
Oh, no.
Hello, Chad. This is Brian here. I hope you and everyone can hear me. We do have your web.
I can hear you. Hope you can
Yep,
hear
you're
me.
fine. We have your webcam. And thank you very much for agreeing to present at our virtual user group this year. And we are at the 1:30 time slot, so I will let you finish introducing yourself and carry on with your presentation. I assume you know how to operate the slides. You've already gone back and forth. Okay, good luck. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. Oh, someone says you can hear both. Great. I hope everyone had a great weekend. I looked at your agenda. You have great topics out there. So hopefully this is interesting to everyone. As you will see in this presentation, I've been looking at this area for a number of years. So I want to share what I know and share just how IBM and DB2 have continued to innovate in this area. Okay, my name is Chad Reiber. I work for BMC Software, and I am a software consultant. What does a software consultant do? If you have any BMC software product that runs on the mainframe, you should have someone like me out there to answer your questions or help you with implementation or installation or something like that. So last year at CCDUG, I presented something with the title Mining Gold from the Db2 Catalog. So in that presentation, I talk about the catalog and a whole bunch of what's in the catalog, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, I had number of tables that you should look at and keep an eye on. And some of those tables you'll see, they're very prominent in this presentation. So a previous presentation leads to the next presentation, and that's where we are here. So, how do I advance? There we go. So I haven't talked about the title yet, so I guess I should get to that, right? I'm going to talk about optimization hints, right? So just how they have grown up, you know, how do we use operational hints, and just how DB2 has grown over the years. So I'll list some features. I'll go through some examples because I think understanding the plumbing of how you get to these optimization hints is worth what you need to do. If you can figure out how DB2 is doing it behind the scenes, it's easier for you to implement that. So throughout the presentation, think about how this might help you in your environment, in your everyday activities with DB2. IBM gives us this capability, so we should understand it and be ready to use it in action if we're required to do it. It might not be something that's, something you're looking to do or something that we need in our environment today, but you never know, tomorrow we might need it. So we have to keep an eye on stuff that IBM gives us the capability to do it, to use out there. So I actually wrote an article back in the year 2000. Yes, the year 2000, year 2K, if we go back that far. So you can see I've been around for a while. You can see by the lack of hair, I've been around for a while. So, probably more than 40, but not 70 yet. But I wrote this article about optimization hints. So if you remember, if you've been around long enough, the iDoug Solutions Journal used to show up at your office or your home, and it was a real magazine where you flipped through and there was ads and a whole bunch of stuff. Right now a lot of that stuff's online. But I wrote an article, and I actually got pushback on this article because in the year 2000, that was around version 6, some people thought IBM put this into the product to combat Oracle. Oracle had hints that they could give to their optimizer that could steer the optimizer one way or another. And some people were like, oh, it's just, IBM keeping up with the Joneses. But it actually wasn't. It actually had some beneficial capabilities, and as you'll see in this presentation, IBM continued to add upon that. So I did get some pushback on the article. The other thing you can notice with the article is the title, The Seedy Underworld of DB2. Okay, and back then it was called UDB for OS 390. So the seedy underworld part kind of suggested that optimization hints was kind of a back room type of thing, right? It was secret, sleazy, a corrupt way to get around the optimizer. The optimizer's going along with his happy self, and you were behind the scenes, circumventing what they were doing. So yeah, it might have had that spin on it. But no, I probably wrote it watching The Sopranos, and if you knew The Sopranos, right, as an organized crime family back in New Jersey. And did I mention I'm from New Jersey? So maybe that's what had something to do about it. So going forward, are we still in the shadows when we talk about optimization hints? Where have we come in 20 years? So I will say the DB2 optimizer is still number one. And if Terry Purcell didn't say that in his previous presentation, I'll be the one to say it, right? It gets better and better. We get better and better access paths. The need to do some of this backroom, sleazy, corrupt things is less and less. Right? The optimizer uses statistics, and hey, we can help, right? The stats feedback table was implemented in version 11, and now in version 12 we'll automatically update run stats profile. So we will get the statistics that the optimizer is really yearning for to come up with a right access path. But stuff still happens, right? We still have those problems, the Monday morning headaches, I call it, right? An application goes in, and then all of a sudden we have different access paths, and it's hurting performance, or end users are complaining. So we still have that. The optimizer still can struggle with statistics or access paths. So there is still a need to do that, whether it's a deployment of new code, right? You know, a new package or plan comes out there, or a new release or function level, we rebind and something goes south. So we still need to manage our access paths. We want to avoid the pain as much as we can out there. So there is still a need. I wouldn't say it's in the shadows. I would say with some of the implementations, it's come out of the shadows. So sorry about the orange screen here. I had a nice picture there, but yeah, the Adobe Connect kind of messed me up. So orange it is, okay? So managing access paths, okay? If we go back to version 6 in my CD underworld, most of the access to DB2, I would say, was static, right? We had plans back then and DBRMs and packages. But today, it's probably more dynamic. So we need to worry about both static and dynamic. And sometimes with dynamic, we don't have the capabilities that we have with static as far as tracking what's going on. But hey, Chad, tell me how I can get an efficient access path. So I'll go I'll go to you know, apple pie and motherhood here, right? Hey, code efficient predicates, build indexes, support the data access, collect the stats on application data, right? And get it all. Don't get just what is easy, right? You know, it might cost you money to save money. Perfect, right? Yeah, well, you know, do we have a whole day to talk about all this stuff, right? We don't. This isn't a presentation. That's a whole class, right? But you know, with that said, when that gets out of control or when it's not in your control and it doesn't work, how can we do something, right? How can we, the two big things on the bottom, how can we influence access paths or prevent access paths? So I was supposed to get on a half an hour early and I only got on 15 minutes early. And some of the stuff that Terry Purcell talked about is preventing those access path changes out there. So I'll talk about that, but just a little bit and at the end. So it's not duplication of data here back to back. So how am I going to influence statement access paths, right? Here in the background, this is an organized crime picture, right? Here's the family, you know, who's the boss and who's the underlings. Well, our organized crime family in this case might be the DBAs, or it might be the performance folks or the system folks. Who knows? Or it could be the applications themselves, right? We have some applications that are really smart out there. But what can we do to influence the access paths? So I'm going to talk about 4 different things in this presentation. Hopefully I meet my time requirement and I'm a little short so we can answer some questions there. So first one is optimization parameters at the statement level, right? So here, you know, we talked about, probably can go back to version 4, right? Star join. We talked about star joins. Well, that was a ZPARM parameter. You set that yes or no, right? But if I want a star join at a statement level, can I get that? Or re-optimization always, or something like that. Can I get that at the statement level? I don't want it at a whole package or plan level, right? Number 2 is overriding predicate selection of statement level. So predicate selectivity overrides. Oof, we're going to save this one for the end because it gets a little heavy, right? If you don't have a daughter or a stepdaughter taking AP stats in high school, yeah, I'm going to dumb this down for myself. And if you guys are into this, there's a lot of information about that. But how about specifying access path at the statement level? Optimizer, you pick this access path. No, let's be corrupt. Let's go behind your back. This is the access path I want to use, right? And I want to do it at a statement level. And then specifying the access path in the plan table itself. And this is the old optimization hint that came out in the article that I published back in 2000 out there. So opt hints, which was the sleazy part of my presentation, right? That was last on our list, but first in my heart, at least, maybe in yours. So this was back in version 6. Like I said, version 6 came out in 1999. So that's why I said this is how access paths partied in 1999, right? Of course, if it's ZOS, right, there has to be a ZPARM to control this, and the ZPARM is ops hint equals yes. So it is controlled by a plan table, right? So the access path for a particular statement, either it gets inserted or updated in the plan table. And then there's a column within that plan table called opt hint. And you updated this value and tell the optimizer, hey, this access path in this plan table, that's the one I want to use. You might have other ideas, but I'm going to give you a break on this one. Just use the one that I provided. So here's my example, right? I have a particular statement in a package that doesn't get an acceptable access path, either at a rebind or just the optimizer can't come up with what I wanted to come up with. And that might be because we went to version 12 or maybe a function level changed something. So how do I do that? I add an operational hint. I'm going to use IDUG1 here. I guess I could use Central Canada User Group 1, but I used IDUG1 on that statement. And then I'll rebind the package. In this case, the package is ABC package, attempting to use the new hint. And that's key, right? I'm attempting to use the new hint because Db2 is still out there and still maintaining that everything's going in the right direction here. So here's the plan table for that package, and I don't have all the columns here. I'm just pointing to the opt hint here, and I updated the opt hint to IDUG1. So here I'm in an editor, and I updated the IDUG1 here. Okay, couple things you want to look at here. So I'm going back to an access path that was bound in 2014. Is that a good idea? That's the idea I want to use here, right? That access path in 2014 is still good today, right? So I want to use that optimization hint of 7 years ago, okay? Number 2, the opt hint here, I'm going to use IDUG1, so keep that in mind, all right? Notice there's a column here, hint use, and that's blank. So right now in this plan table, this row here is not being used as an operational hint. Now, what I don't show you here in a plan table, and I know everyone has plan table on their mind all the time, right? There's a plan, package, version, there's a query number all associated with this here as well. I don't have that listed here, but no, that's out there. So I put in the hint. Now I want to use the hint. So I would rebind the package, and there's a parameter here. Where is it? I'll find it. Opt hint, right here, opt hint IDUG1. So this is how we tell the rebind that, hey, look in the existing plan table for this correlation ID, this package, and this version. See if there's an opt hint IDUG1. And if there is, I want you to use that when you do the rebind. So I did this rebind, and you'll notice out here the output of that rebind. It says, hey, one statement for that opt hint was fully applied. Now, if that was a bad opt hint, say it used an index, was no longer there, or maybe that access path has been obsolete for years. It was a 7-year-old plan plan table. So it might say, nope, I can't do it. I have to fall back to I'll take over here. So it could work or not work, but here the output of this rebind tells me it did work out there. So here's the proof points. Wow, this is tiny, but stick with me here. You might have to blow this up. What I'm trying to show you here is if I took that statement that I put the opt-ins on and I did a dynamic explain, that's what the white is here, right? So this white here, this XD01, that's if I took that statement and I just did a dynamic explain. I passed it to the optimizer and what access path was going to get. So a couple things to look at here. The cost was 663 timer-ons, if you will, okay? And if I look at the output of the explain, and that's what this part below is, it did a table space scan, an index scan, a table space scan, and then an index scan. So RI, RI, okay? Now, XS is saying, give me the explain from the plan table. I just did a rebind. Tell me what the plan table has. Well, the plan table, if you look at the cost is down. It's only 405. Huh. Okay, why is that different? And remember, what's in the plan table is what the rebind was and what actually is going to happen when we run that package. And notice, if you will, the access path is now RIII. So instead of one of the scans that the optimizer would use if I just didn't provide a hint, the hint actually used an index, and that drove down the cost. So heads up, I used the optimization hint that I wanted to use, and it was good. It drove the cost down, per se. Now, if I go to the right some more on the actual plan table output, I'm pointing here, like you can see where I'm pointing, but you actually can, but there's no screen where you're looking. You'll notice that the hint used is now updated, and it should say IDUG1, but there's only 4 characters in this output, so take my word for it. It is IDUG1, signifying that I used the opt hint that you provided, and I am now using IDUG1 as that opt hint. All right, so this is how you can tell whether it's being used. Now, just an aside here, just a little extra bonus here. If I look at this bottom one here, what is EXPL? What is that for the optimized used here? So it goes back to this previous visual here, XP01. Remember, with plan management, right, we can keep the original, the previous, and the current explains or access paths within the catalog and directory. What that is showing is I did that. I looked at the original and said, I want to see what the original looked like. So when you do an explain of the original package and package management, Db2 actually updates the hint used and tells you what version of that package you're actually doing an explain on. So just a little bit, just a little extra stuff there. I think that came along in version 12. I'm not sure. Somebody can check me on that. But anyway, let's continue on. So, hey, how do I know this is taking effect, right? And why do I even care? Because, hey, your system could have been using optimization hints for a number of years, and no one's actually rebind these programs in a year, right? So going into the catalog might be helpful to see just what's going on out there. I do see this in the marketplace. You know, I visit other customers, and I do see where some old optimization hints are still out there. So how am I going to deliver this news here, this picture of the guy, you know, smoking a cigarette in a dark restaurant here? So you could look at this package. There's an opt hint column out there. in syspack statements, the access path is going to have an H in there that says it's using a optimization hint, and then the plan table as well. So I know some people post-process that plan table. You can look for certain things that are in that plan table out there. So some good news and some bad news about optimization hints. It does work for static and dynamic. That's the good news. In dynamic SQL, you can set the optimization hint through a set current command. It uses the current SQL to find the plan table. So that could be an issue, not be an issue. And it will issue a SQL code if it found it and it's used. If it found it and it's invalid, it'll also issue an SQL code. But here's the question you're probably asking yourself. I'm looking at the chat, no one's asked it. But just how is DB2 matching this statement in the plan table, right? So the way it's matching it is on query number, application name, program name, version, collection ID, and optimization hint name, right? Whether you set it through the current hint or you did it within the bind. But we know if this is a new package or a package that's being deployed, the query number can change. So how do we avoid that? Did you know you can actually code a query number on your query statements? So go ahead, do that, State of New Jersey and query number 99. So go back to all your developers and say, hey, put a query number on all your statements. Probably something that's not going to be done. And that leads us to, we can do it better, right? Let's not match on query number. Let's actually match on statement. So version 10, version 11 of DB2 came out with a different way to support optimization hints or influencing access paths at a statement level. So there's prereqs, right? You still need that zparm out there. But there's a new user table required called a DSN user query table. From this point on, seeing that we're, in the CD underworld, I'm going to call this the big boss table, all right? The big boss table tells DB2 what's going on, all right? Just like he tells, all his people what's going on. The big boss table calls the shots. Now the statement to be matched must be in something that is a bind package. So if it's a create function, create trigger, or create procedure, not going to use operational hints. It has to be a bind package. So there are some limitations, but good news, still supports dynamic and static. So a couple additional things this implementation helps, the new opt hint, is it can be system-wide. So it doesn't have to be lined up to a package or an application or a version. So it can be system-wide. But if you do want to align it to a collection, it could be to a specific version, or it could be any version of the collection of the package. And again, it is controlled by the big boss table. Now these tables to the right here, the sysquery plan, those are new catalog tables that keep the optimization hint within them. So this goes back to my mining DB2 data. Here are some new new catalog tables that you might want to query to see just what's going on here, right? Remember, we're doing this behind the scenes in the back room of the restaurant here, so we still need to see some remnants of what's going out there, and we might want to look at what we've done in the past and keep it in mind. So what can we change using this big boss table? And some of the stuff is cut off here, but I'll talk to it. I think this is Al Capone, I'm not sure. So we can specify optimization parameters, we can specify the access path, and the last one is to deal with selectivity of the predicates. And we'll go through each one of those as we go forward here. So this is the DSN user query table. Check your catalog, see if you have it out there. Note, you can't really create one under your ID with a like statement. You actually want to get the DDL and create from the DDL. So it's in the DSN SAMP data set, or if there's one out there, you know, if you use RC Query or Catalog Manager, create the DDL if you want to create one under your schema or, you know, table owner. So if I want to insert the statement into the DSN user query table, how do I do that? So there is a query number here, but it's used as a primary key and it's used as a relationship to some of the other tables that we need to update. It's not the query number of the statement within your package. Know that. Schema. So if the SQL statement that you're inputting here is unqualified, what's the schema, right? So if it's the individual table, you know, is it the MKT CWR individual table, or is it the prod table individual table? You have to tell us what the schema is if it's unqualified. Now you can't wildcard the schema. Don't get excited. If you have multiple tables, schema, multiple table owners, you need to put an entry in for each one of those. So careful of that. I tried wildcarding, it doesn't work, so don't go there. And then you actually have to give the query text, the actual text of the statement, right? Because it's going to try to match on that statement itself. So the scope is important, and it's binary. Either you go system-wide or you go package level. And if you go package, you got to give me a collection and a package. You can wildcard the version. So you have the capability of wildcard the version, and my example actually shows the wildcarding of version. And then you tell me what hint, or you don't tell me, you tell the boss what the hint is, right? So are you changing selectivity of the predicates? Is it an access path hint, or is it an override at the statement level? Okay, so you can't do all three, and I'll tell you when you can mix and match that stuff. So a little bit more information about the SQL statement that you're adding as well. So when DB2 takes this statement, and I don't know 100%, but what I think it's doing is it's actually hashing that statement to a hash key. And the way I know that is if you look at some of the sysIBM, sysquery, and those tables, you see that there is a hash key that is being used out there. So I think it's using that hash key to try to match up. So it removes a lot of non-important information, but remember, if you're using some of the application defaults like decimal point or string or CCSID, that comes into play here. So while not required, if you are going packaging collections, it is probably best to use that because DB2 can get some of that information from that. So the next question you're asking yourself is, where do I get this query text from to use to put into the big boss table, right? So if it's static, get it from syspack statement, get it from the DBRM. If it's dynamic, get it from the statement cache itself. One other caveat here is the object names and the SQL keywords need to be in uppercase, okay? If it's not in uppercase, it doesn't really match too well, and you might be doing this and hitting your head against the wall, which we do a lot in DB2, but just a caveat there that you want to keep in mind. So I want to do optimization parameters, right? So I can change the reop bind parameter down at the statement level, right? So I can set it to just do it once. I can set it to do it always. There's another value there that I can't remember off the top of my head. But you can set that reop parameter at the actual statement level. And then you can set some of the zparm parameters like star join, degree of parallelism, if I even want parallelism turned on, and then in a star join, how many tables can participate in that star join. So you can set those within the big boss table. And then you have to tell it for that statement, you want to override these particular optimization parameters. So in my example, I want to set reopt always for a particular statement. So I'm going to particularly update the big boss table, the user query table, and I'm going to set it system-wide, and I'm going to say reopt always. We haven't talked about it yet, but to get that turned on, we have to do something called the bind query. And we'll talk about bind query in a second. So this is a dynamic statement and I want to do that too. So I'm going to use a BMC product to go to the statement cache and find that dynamic statement that I want to change it on. So within my product here, I go to the statement cache. I'm looking at programs that start with CR, and guess what? There's 2 statements in the cache for that. And it's really that first guy that I want to actually set this hint on. So I go there, I pull it up, and here's that statement. It's got some parameter markers out there. I'm going to cut and paste that into my update to the big boss table. So here I'm updating my own personal user query table. And if you look here, I do give it a query number. There's really no query number out there. There's a statement cache number, but that can change when we, bounce DB2. So I'm going to give it a query number because it needs it for primary key. My hint scope is going to be 0 for system-wide. Go ahead, knock yourself out. And then I actually add the statement within the table. And then, so Dean is saying he's not getting any sound. Someone just text me if you're not hearing any sound. Or if you're hearing sound, please text me. I'm going to say okay, great. All right, good. I wanted the reop vars of always, so that's actually set it to Y. And option override is set to Y. So for this statement, if you see it, I want you to reop vars, and I'm doing that system-wide, not for a particular package, even though I could because you saw it was for a particular package. Hold that thought. I also want to set an access path for a certain statement that's out there. So to do that, I need to give what that access path is. Now the plan table comes into play, right? So in the big boss table, I'm going to say access path hint of yes, okay? And I have to go into the plan table and put my actual access path that I want. Now, for this implementation optimization hints, I don't have to specify optimization hint in the plan table row. I don't have to rebind in my bind and rebind. I don't have to use the opt hint keyword. But I use the query number in the big boss table to match the query number in the plan table. So those two have to match up. So here's my example. Got a statement in my package, unacceptable access path. So I'm going to add an entry to the big boss table. I'm going to add an appropriate access path to the plan table. Again, I got to do this bind query thing that I haven't talked to you about. And then I'm going to rebind my package. So a little bit more work, but I'm actually changing an access path in this case. So here, when I update the big boss table, I am going to actually put in a subselect where I get the statement right from the package statement. Okay, so this is an existing statement, so I'm going to go to the catalog and pull that out. Now my query number for the big boss table, I made all 9s, and that's important because I need a plan table row that has all 9s because that's what is going to match to 2 up. Now you'll notice I give it a collection ID and a package, but I wildcard my version and I tell the big boss that I want an access path hint. Now, remember I need a plan table entry out there. So in my big boss table, I got all 9s here for the statement that I just populated from the catalog, which was a declare cursor. But in my plan table, now I'm going to have to add something with all 9s and give it the access path that I actually want. So the all 9s access path in the plan table is what I want Db2 to use. I want the optimizer to use. So before I can do the rebind on that, I have to do this bind query because the bind query is like the hitman of the organized crime family, okay? It's going to take what I put in the big boss table, so what the big boss told me, and in the case of number 2, the plan table, it's going to take that information, look at it, verify it's okay, and if it's okay, actually update the catalog with the sysquery plan, the ops, and we haven't talked about the predicate and the query select. So the bind query has 2 attributes. It's lookup yes no, and it's explain input schema. So again, this only works as opt hints is set to yes in zparm. So if you try to run query and it didn't, and it's not set to yes, you'll get an error. But the bind query will look in the user query table and look for the rows that are in there. It processes all the rows in the user query table. And then it does its validation and it inserts into the query table. The query lookup yes, that's not doing anything. It's just looking up whether their row in the user query table has a matching row in the catalog in these sysquery tables. Okay, and then it'll update a column in the user query table if it actually finds that connection there. So the explain input schema allows you to actually name the schema of the user query table, of the plan table, and 2 of these other tables that I haven't talked about, the predicate table and the predicate selectivity table. So if you want to create this in a separate space under a different table owner, you can do that, and then you can pass that with the bind query. So you'll see in some best practices that might be a good way of going. Sorry about the racketeering phase, talk, Jeff. I'll keep it to a minimum. So here I did a bind query lookup no. So this is actually going to do the work for me, right? And when I issue that statement, you'll see that 2 of those statements, the 100 and the 999, were successful. So you can get a bad bind query, say for a particular query, and it'll give you a reason code of why that wasn't bad. For me, the most recent one was I had query number 999 in my user query table, but there was no corresponding row in the plan table. So it says, hey, you want an access path, but I can't find that access path in that table. So here are some of the notes that I talked about. You might not want to lead the stuff around in the user query, because every time you do a bind query, it's reading that whole user query table. So it's going to redo some work that you've already put in there. So there's a risk to that, right? You might not want to do that. I talked about the explain input schema. It does require a high authority. Not just anybody can do this type of work, right? Because it is monkeying with the access paths. And then what if I don't want it anymore? What if I want to get rid of that? There is a free query command that will take the rows out of the catalog, out of the query. And there's multiple ways to free that. You can do it at a package, you can do it at a query ID, you can do all of it. Just back it all out. But remember, you have to rebind after you back all that stuff out if you want it to take effect. I didn't talk about this user filter, but that's a way to group some optimizations, and it's a field in the user query table that you can set. So you can have a user filter of payroll, all right? So you do that for all the payroll apps, and if you want to free all that hints for the payroll, you can say free query user filter payroll, and it would back that out. So did all this setup, did the bind query, right? So how do I actually get these new access paths? You have to do a rebind in the case of a static, and in the case of dynamic, it happens when you prepare the statement. So in my case, if you did it, you want to invalidate the cache, re-execute that dynamic statement, and see if it takes effect. So just a little proof here. Here's where I did the dynamic SQL. So up on top is the statement that I actually added to the user query table. And here I actually executed that statement. You can see the statement matches. And how I prove it is when I actually executed this statement, you'll notice the statement actually read the sysquery and the sysquery ops table that had that reop vars always in it. So it matched the statement and it did what it asked me to do. The bind statement, notice there's no opt hint in this bind statement now. But if I go and look, similar view as before, right? If I did a dynamic statement, it was 663. And now it's using 605 because it used the hint that I actually put into sysquery, sysquery plan 225. So that's the query number in sysquery plan. So it didn't use 100, didn't use 9999. Db2 came up with its own query number to do that. And you'll notice I actually used a different version there because if you remember, I wildcarded the version. So just to review, because I'm running up on my time here, thought I'd be done early, but guess not. I added a query, 100,999, plan table 999, okay? I did the bind query lookup no, and what DB2 did was it added a row to sysquery, actually added 2 rows. It came up with its own query ID, and for sysplan it was query 225, which we saw in the previous view. And for the reopt, it came up with query 224, and it updated the query ops table versus the query plan table. So how did it get executed? Through my prepare or my bind package. If I do the rebind package with explain yes, you will see query number 472 and the hint used will be updated to the query number of sysplan, sysquery plan. So the third one is overriding predicate selectivity. So what are we talking about here? predicate selectivities. What is that? So it allows you to change the filter factor for certain predicates. So, right, Db2 optimizer, the percentage of rows that are going to be applied is done through the filter factor that it comes up with, right? So a filter factor of 0.1 says 10% of those rows qualify. The smaller the better, right? It's good index choice. However, sometimes the optimizer can't get the filter factor, right? So it's going to use a default filter factor, whether it's a host variable, a parameter marker, some expressions. Sometimes in subqueries, it can't come up with a filter factor. So can we tell the optimizer what the filter factor is? Because sometimes we just know better, right? So again, we're going to use the query table. But two other tables that we're going to be able to use, the DSN predicate table and the DSN predicate selectivity table. And then when we do the bind query, we're going to update this query predicate and query selectivity table. So to use this one, we need to understand what DB2 uses a little bit. So if you run an explain an object, you will see that the predicate table gets updated if you have one allocated, and you'll also see the DSN predicate selective table be updated as well. So in this query here, the one that I have been using, you could see there's a lot of predicates here. So this is from the predicate table. There's 9, 10, 11 predicates that were used in that query. It was a big query, it had some unions in it, blah, blah, blah. If I look at the DSN predicate selectivity table that gets updated in the explain, there's actually 21 items within that for that same statement. So remember, DB2 will add predicates if it thinks it's beneficial to come up with the access path. So from 11, we actually have 21 different things that we can change in the selectivity. So let's make it a little simpler here. I have a statement that actually has two predicates, right? It's the first order date, and the primary key is the left-hand side of the predicate, as you could see right here, okay? And if I look at the predicate selectivity table, it actually came up with 3. It got predicate 2, which is 0.33, and predicate 3, which is 0.01. 0.01 is good. 0.33 is because it had to use a default. It's using a range predicate, and it's also using an expression. So DB2 says, I'm going to use the default. The default is 0.33, okay? Well, that's too high. I know better. I know the data, and I want to change the filter factor that the optimizer is going to use. So one, I'm going to do the explain and allow DB2 to populate these tables. Now check if you have these tables. If not, create them if you want to do this exercise, okay? And what I've done is I've added 2 rows here, okay? And you can see the 2 rows that I've added. And let's delve a little bit deeper into those 2 rows. So what are you updating, Reiber? What are you talking about? So the 2 rows I've added, we've updated the instance, the selectivity, the weight, and the assumption. So the instance, in this case, is how we want to break it up here, and let me populate this. It's all the key numbers here. So what I'm saying is, in one instance, 50% of the time, 5% of the rows are going to qualify for that predicate, and 25%, 1% of the rows in that table is going to qualify for that predicate. Okay, so the 50% and 25% is the weight, and the 5% and 1% is the selectivity, or you can think of it as the filter factor. The assumption is I want you to override this, and the instance is how many slices and dices of that predicate do I want to do. So you can have 20 different instances of the filter factor, and you can't go over 1, right? 100% is 100%. And what we call that in the manual is a selectivity instance, right? So we can have 20 of those. And adding up all the instances is a profile. So don't forget, you have to update the big boss table, right? Again, the selectivity override is set to Y, and you have to give it the statement that you want to do it, right? And I've used 222 because you've seen I've updated my DSN predicate and selectivities to 222. I'm going to do a bind query. 222 is successful. Okay, I'm going to rebind my package here, and it's going to say, we saw that you had a selectivity. We applied it. And now if I look at my statement, which is down here on the bottom, I actually use the selectivity, and you can see that the hint has been updated to use sys selectivity 232. So just review, because I'm up to my time here. I do my query, and now 232, I updated the sys query predicate and the select. So actually the bind query did that for me. Thank you very much, Db2. And again, it's going to update the hint used. So I'm going to finish up here, guys, because I'm way past my time, and Chris is coming up here, and I want to leave some time for Chris to get all set up. But there's a little assurance out there, and I think Terry Purcell talked a little bit about this in the AP reuse. Note that if you do AP reuse warn, Db2 will update the explain table with that hint used and say, hey, this explain is from a reuse of a previous access path. So again, if you want to mine some of this data, even AP reuse is captured within Db2 and allows us to do it. I think this is going to be my next presentation, the dynamics plan stability, and that's the way to actually capture dynamic statements and the access path of those, so you can store those and utilize those, so we're not getting different access paths when there's an IPL or there's an invalidated of access paths out there. So there's again another DB2 table that you should keep an eye on, the DSN DYN query, that could have some stabilizing access paths, and do you want to still use them? That's up to you. But it will be in those catalog tables. There's also an order that Db2 uses when it's going to look at an access path optimization. Here's the order, and the last one is the last one we talked about. So the predicate selectivities, it's going to go through all of them, and if we still see predicate selectivities, it'll pick up on that guy. And just a couple final thoughts here. Again, it's good to know because you might need this in a crisis. These hints can become stale, so you want to monitor and limit the use. It goes a little bit behind the scenes that we're not using the opt hint on the rebind. It's actually looking at the sys query table to try to find a match in the statements. So again, mine that data, know what you have out there, okay? And then manage the big boss table, the user query table, have a best practice, maybe move it to a history table after you've implemented it, so you know what's going to be issued when you do the bind query out there. So hopefully you get some info out of this.
This is Brian L here.
I know the guys have
yeah, you gave
my
us a lot to
email
digest.
address, so feel free to ask me
If anyone is
questions.
interested, they can download
Email
the
me with
presentation
questions, ask your
within this
DB2, your
room right
BMC
now
software
within Adobe Connect,
consultant.
or else it's
They know where
available
to
on our
find me as
website
well. So
for download.
hopefully, like I said, this
CCDUG.ca. No, CCDB2.ca. And you can should have Chad's email there. Okay, we will take a few minutes of break for people to get a coffee or a glass of water. And Chris Crone has entered the room, and we will test that he is set up properly. Again, Chad, thanks very much.